You are about to enter the Shockwave Skull Sessions podcast on shockwaveskullsessions.com. And now your host, Bob Nalbandian.
All right, here we are, Shockwave Skull Sessions, episode number 104. I got my partner, Matt Hartnett. What's happening, Matt?
What's going on, Bob? Looking forward to this one today, man.
Yeah, man, we got a very special guest, Danny Zelisko, the author of a brand new book called Total Excess. Total Excess, not access. It is excess with the dollar signs, correct?
All excess.
All access. I want to say total access. I'm thinking of Total Access Studio, and now I'm saying so all excess. There you go, with the dollar sign symbols as the S's in the title. So, I always say about these books, I love getting the perspective of somebody outside of the musicians, whether it be a roadie or a producer or a promoter, because you seem to get more of the facts straight, for once, because most musicians during those days were pretty hammered and they're don't remember quite as well as some of the road crew or road managers or producers or, as I say, promoters. And you always have a different perspective, always kind of an interesting perspective, and you're not afraid to tell the whole story. A lot of musicians, obviously, they're going to keep some stuff out that they might be embarrassed about, or they might not remember it correctly. So again, it's always great to read these books, Danny.
Well, I tell you what, the musicians, they don't know anything about the stories or what's going on at a show because they're not there.
Right.
They show up at 5 o'clock for sound check. So they have no idea what's taking place around that show, pretty much from the time it was booked till the time they get off stage. All they know is they better show up and play and be good. But other than that, you're right. The roadies, the road managers, the promoters, the booking agents, everybody else has a lot more knowledge of what's happening at each of these shows, which if the people who bought tickets knew half the stuff that was going on, they'd have a good laugh.
Yeah, plus you have the perspective of the business end too. What goes on being a promoter, what goes on before the show, what goes on after the show, all the stuff that goes on in between. And that's always a job. Oh, there's Jimmy.
Hey!
Oh, we got our second, I guess, co-host / guest, Jimmy Arceneaux. What's happening, Jimmy? You're a little bit. Can you put a little bit more light on there, or? Actually,
he's good. He's good.
You're good. You're good. All right. So, how you doing there, Jimmy? This is Jimmy Arceneaux. Meet Danny Zelisko.
Hey, Jimmy.
Danny, what's up, man? How you doing?
I'm good, thanks.
So let me tell you something. I've got to tell you right before we even start, I heard your name even before I got into the game. So you are, it's like meeting like a rock star right now to me. So.
All right. Well, hell, I probably ought to get a joint and relax here with you.
There you go. Nice.
You got your rum and Coke. You're ahead of us. So.
Oh, shit.
You were thinking ahead. There you go. You might have to get a refill there, Danny.
Oh, I will.
Well, right on it. Jimmy, this is my partner, Matt Hartnett. I don't know
What's
if
up,
you guys
Jimmy?
officially met.
How you doing?
How you doing, brother?
Nice to meet
But
you.
since we got you on, let me give a quick intro about you, Jimmy. You're obviously from the Bay Area, and as you know, Danny started the Bay Area working with Bill Graham. Now, didn't you do a lot of work with Bill Graham or co-shows at the Omni, or did he just work exclusively the Fillmores?
No,
clubs? Of course, they get on the greens and all that. But.
No, I got to, of course, rub shoulders with the mighty Bill Graham, but I never worked under him. No.
I gotcha. Well, why don't you kind of give a little background about what you did, and then you and Jimmy you and Danny could, relate some. I'm sure there's a lot of relatable stories from when. So, Danny, did you start in the Bay Area? Was that your beginning as a promoter? I know back in. Oh, go ahead.
Not really. I came out there in '72 after I got out of high school, and I tried to get a job with BGP, but I couldn't do that. I managed to be there and involved in just one show that summer, and which I wrote about in the book, which was a kind of an amusing story of.
That's a great story, yeah.
Me walking onto an equipment truck and acting like I worked for the band or the promoter, and English accents and everything else. And then Bill busted me later that night. And tried to get a job. I think he liked me. I hung out with him all night, but they had no openings at that time for people who knew nothing and were 17 years old, and we're looking for paychecks. So the good news was I didn't get hired, and I went back to Chicago and finished my business there as a kid growing up. And I moved to Arizona, and I started promoting shows there, but it was definitely with the inspiration of Bill, whether he gave it to me on purpose or not. It was he was an awesome man, and I'm really happy to say that after some years later, I actually got to be friends with him, and we had a great few years together, and I wouldn't trade him for anything.
And you said that was kind of common to begin in the promoting game, is to kind of help as a roadie and to get your foot in the door and with these promoters and kind of get you.
You got to do something, and I mean, it's like for being a promoter, I mean, it's such a special kind of a job or a task that only a lunatic would accept. Because before you get into being a promoter, you don't really know a whole lot of anything about anything. I mean, in my case, I didn't. I was 17, 18, 19 years old. So that, coupled with the fact that I had no skills, meant that I was just a dumb little kid who had the right intentions. And the difference between me and a lot of the kids that, well, they all have good intentions, but that aren't as goofy as others, you get through. And, as long as you're able to master the art of belonging against all odds, you have a chance of getting through and actually doing something in the music business anyway. And that's kind of what happened for me. But I mean, after a while, you got to stop BSing, and there's no more smoke and mirrors. You got to do something and deliver something, or people are going to go, why is he here again? And suddenly you're out of a gig. So you better do something right.
Sure.
Right on.
Yeah,
I have
Danny,
no idea what any of that means, but it seems to have worked.
Got you where you are, man.
Yeah, man. Well, Danny, one of the things about you, you definitely took the road less traveled to, your success as a promoter. I mean, as a guy who had, like you mentioned, very little to no experience, you also, eventually wisely went into a mid-major market like Arizona and Phoenix, which didn't have, much of a vibrant scene at that time in terms of having live rock music, even though there was obviously a market for it that you wound up tapping into. And as you mentioned in the book, there was only one venue at the time in the Phoenix area, right, that would put on bigger rock shows. I mean, so before you went to Arizona, were you already aware that there was, I guess, great potential in that market, including Vegas and in Mexico, which of course became your eventually your territory there?
I went a second time to Arizona, and that was later. Was it later that year, or maybe it was early '73? And I saw John Mayall play at the Celebrity Theater, and so this was when John wasn't 100 years old. I just got asked to book him, and I'm definitely gonna book him again. I'd love to see him. But I went to see him at the Celebrity. It was when he was doing The Turning Point, which was my favorite Mayall album. And I loved this theater, and I loved the vibe, and I loved the radio station that was there at the time. And I decided I was going to, move back and permanently live in Arizona. And the promoter there only worked in that theater. And if he had really been smart, he would have just stayed in that theater and never worked anywhere else, because it's one of the best live music theaters there is. And a lot of people get outside of those smaller theaters and they get lost in the arena shuffle and the stadiums and the money and all the stuff that follows. And he was one of them. He actually went into Scientology, and we never heard from him again.
Wow.
But I kind of eased my way in as he was eased out. And that's why I went to Arizona, because being from Chicago, there was already established promoters in that market. And I felt like, holy cow. I mean, I came from the city of Richard J. Daley, okay? And I came from the Democratic National Convention in 1968 and the Chicago 7 and the trial of Julius Hoffman, 1969. and I was just getting into high school. So, you know, I mean, I probably couldn't have grown up in a more turbulent but greater time to, you know, to get into the business that I get into. So it was just going to concerts in Chicago. But I mean, there was a thing as I think back to that. I mean, did I know I was going to do this? I don't think so, but I knew I liked it. And I know, I mean, going to concerts and buying albums and learning more and more about more bands and finding out more information about the business and so on and so forth as each day and each year went by, it just made sense that I got into doing this. And I'm really obviously happy that I did, because I've had a great time, you know, doing it. But I was having a good time before I did this, and it's just, you know, it's like it's a click of the fingers or a click of the ruby red slippers, Dorothy, and it's 50 years later, and here we are, and now I'm just waiting to do concerts. I've got about 50 or 100, I don't even know, I quit counting, shows that were booked prior to this time last year. And now we're just trying to reschedule all of them. And you know, the greatest thing, not the greatest, but I mean, one of the cool things that took place with all the tickets that were sold, and I understand it's the same with a lot of other promoters, is that most everybody's held on to their tickets and they're waiting to go to the shows, you know, all over the place, all over the globe. I feel like it's a real great unity, you know, among music fans, in that, you know, they already went through the problems or the difficulties or whatever you go through to buy tickets. Make sure that you're aware of it, get them when they go on sale. And who wants to give them back? Because you'd be admitting or saying that the show is never going to happen by giving your tickets back. So we, on some shows, we're up to 90% have kept their tickets, and it's as low as 75%, which is still 3/4 of the people that bought tickets a year ago are still sitting on tickets waiting to go to their show. And I'm damn well going to give them their show. So once all those shows happen, we'll see what happens for me in the world after that. But I got to put on those shows. I'm committed to them.
Are you looking toward later this year, possibly? Or have you had any word as far as, I don't know if Arizona is different than California. I'd imagine it is.
My personal time that I'm aiming for is Labor Day.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
I think shows will happen before then. I think there'll start to be some shows, perhaps some limited capacity type things, but I mean, I want to approach as we're getting closer. I think it would be fun for me to get some bands that would normally draw 2,000 and ask them to come and do 2 shows and do 1,000 in 2,000 seats. And let's get everybody warmed up again and used to going out again. I think that's going to, you know, the reentry program here, I think, is going to be very important and special to a lot of people, bands, agents, managers, promoters, everybody. But I'm very anxious to get back at it. I haven't been a big fan of doing the social distancing type shows and trying to reinvent the wheel and get bands to play for less money and so forth. But I'm now getting the feeling like there's going to be some bands that are going to want to be at the outset of our return to live music, and I think you'll start to see some special situations arise around the country and around the world as we start to open up again. I'm just hoping that, you know, I'm watching the news, and some states are, I think, opening prematurely and rushing it. I hope it doesn't damage their states, and I hope it doesn't damage, you know, the ability for people to go from state to state and worry about, you know, those states. And they're not very far away from Arizona. They're Texas and Oklahoma are the ones that I'm seeing where they're, you know, I mean, the authorities are telling people to take off their masks. And I don't understand that. I mean, you know, it's a shit kicker mentality I've never been fond of, and I'm still not, just to be honest with you. I mean, what are they thinking? Come on.
Right.
Ride it out, man.
Yeah.
You know, we've gone all
not much longer.
way.
Yeah.
We've gone all this way and all of the things that have happened on a national stage, we don't have to get into all that, but I mean, here it is March, and we're actually, you know, vaccines are happening. I got both of mine. No favors were pulled. I mean, I signed up like everybody else, and more people are getting that done, and that's great. And the numbers are going down, and that's great. So this is not the time to lose it. This is the time to really watch your P's and Q's and stay cool. Stay cool now, man. I mean, March, April, May, we get through these next couple of months and we're home free, you know, but screw it up and we'll be right back where we were.
Right.
That's just my look at it. I've been playing armchair quarterback like everybody else on this thing for the last year. And I don't know anything more than anybody else, but I do know that in Arizona, on a couple of occasions, we rushed the relaxing of certain rules that should have stayed in place longer, and we got whacked really, really good and hard. And you know, they're just now starting to go down, and keeping my thumbs up that they'll stay that way.
I think some of the outdoor shows, Jimmy, let me know if I'm wrong, but isn't the in Sacramento the big Aftershock Festival with Metallica doing the 2 nights there? That's scheduled for October, and as far as I know, they sold most of the tickets for that.
Yeah.
It might even be sold out 3 nights.
I think it's sold out.
It's sold out.
Go on sale?
That went on sale like a year ago, before the pandemic. So like before the pandemic, it all went on sale. And as far as I know, they're still looking. Again, that's in October, and it is outdoors, but we're talking, you know, 70, 80,000 people.
Yeah,
at least.
I'd really like to think by October they can do that.
Yeah.
I
think outdoor might be a little easier. I don't know, but you know, as far as the capacities go, but,
you know, you know, I mean, to me, the jury's still out on that one. When you put that many people together,
that's true. You know, they crowd together. You can't social distance at a festival. You can't say everybody stays.
When they're doing that many people in that, you know, in that space during that time, I mean, we just gotta. They've got to be honest about, you know, how they deal with that based on what information they have then. You know, I mean, if the numbers in California went back up again, I'd expect them to postpone it again. Yeah. You know, and I'm not saying it will. I hope they don't. I mean, because California's right next to Arizona, man, and I don't want to see any more delays either, you know, but I don't want to see any people get sick unnecessarily. I really, you know, I'm not a scientist, obviously, or a doctor, but it just seems a year later now, it's much different than it was for that March through the summer and how gnarly, you know, everything was. It feels like the cloud's going to go away here real soon, and I hope that feeling is correct. I mean, I can't guarantee it, but I feel like this is coming to an end. I'd like to think that we've gone through the worst days of it. I hope so.
So can I ask you something, going back to what you said about unique promotional ideas for shows? I really think the residence kind of concept for playing smaller capacity, you know, but doing multiple shows in one place, you know, because traveling costs so much money anyway, you know, it's got to be, I think that a lot of houses should start thinking that way, even especially on a club level, because, you know, if you're 1,000 capacity club and you can only do 350 to 500 people, you know, obviously, you know, there's a balance you have to do there. I think residencies are kind of at least at first, to kind of like get people back into the swing of things.
I think that's definitely valid. You know, it boils down to what you can do financially or not do as the promoter or the group. And you know, in the groups, you know, from the group standpoint, they're used to or need to make X amount of dollars per week to pay their staff and the band and the manager and the lawyers. Everybody gets paid, depending on the size of the band. And you know, if somebody can draw several thousand people and they can figure out how to do multi-night stands in places. That's always been an option and always been a good idea. I haven't seen too many people do it yet.
Right.
No,
I mean, there's been a couple of instances where they're doing it, but I mean, take a name. How about Boz Scaggs? Great name, right? Now, if I did Boz Scaggs in Phoenix, I could probably draw no less than 1,500, maybe 2,000 people. If I had them over on a weekend and I had a Friday and Saturday night, I could sell 1,000 tickets, 1,200 tickets a night easily for him, especially if it was a Friday, Saturday. But think of, I mean, a guy like him for one show, I mean, he's got to make 50 grand, right?
Yeah.
And he's got to do that 5 times a week.
Right.
So then it just turns into pure math.
But that's a good point, as I say, that you brought up, Jimmy, because I know, of course, Danny, you do a lot of shows in Vegas, and that's a common thing, and it's been very successful, you know, obviously with Kiss, Def Leppard, Scorpions, a lot of bands do that, you know, and it started with, you know, obviously the pop of Celine Dion and all that kind of stuff. And I remember quite a few years ago when Prince did that at the Forum. He did 25 consecutive nights at the Los Angeles Forum. People thought he was nuts, and it was a great thing because it eliminated the scalpers, because I think it was only $25 a ticket. And so the scalpers couldn't sell tickets for $300 because there were 25 dates. They were just buy, you know, just for the next show. And it eliminated that pretty much. And it was cheap. It was great. And, you know, he still got paid a ton of money. He didn't have to travel. And I thought after that show, I said, and the Forum at that point wasn't really active. They had just refurbished it or whatever. And I heard all 25 nights pretty much sold out. And I'm thinking, wow, this is a start of something. If LA could do it, you know, doing what Vegas is, I think that this will be. But, and you know, there's not many artists like at the level of Prince at the time that could pull that off, obviously.
And you know what? I think by the time, you know, because everybody's just been kind of hanging around waiting. I mean, think about it. Last year in March and in April, none of us knew what this was. We didn't know. I mean, if you would have told me in March or April I wasn't going to have shows the rest of the year, I would have told you you're nuts. You know, so nobody knew. The bands didn't know. Nobody knew anything about what was going to take place. So here we are a year later, and we're still talking about it. I don't think any of these bands are going to come out here and do anything unless they absolutely have to. If they're starving, they'll come out and do what we were just talking about. If they're not starving, they're not going to do that. Because I think there's a number of reasons, but the bottom line is they don't want to. I don't think they want to really goose people for giant ticket prices just to come and see them. And by the same token, they don't want to go out there and lose money doing it. So you know, it's that fine line you got to walk where you're in the court of public opinion, as far as, you know, are you doing the right thing or the wrong thing? And the bottom line is, people want to have shows. I don't think people want to have shows any other way than the way that they're used to. They want to be with people, whether they know them or not, and they don't want to be like yelling across the room to say hello to somebody. Right. You know, they want to be right there. That's what I'm feeling. That's what I'm seeing. And I think that's eventually what's going to come out. We'll do things the way we've always done them.
You know, there's been talk too about having, you know, I know it's a little, you know, before, but, you know, having these vaccination sort of passports. Do you think that's something that's going to ever come into effect where you're going to need to prove that you've got vaccines in order to attend a show?
I don't think it's a bad idea. I have taken a photograph of the card that they filled out each time I got my 2 shots. I have that on my phone in the event somebody wants to see it.
Well, that's what I'm thinking. Most people that already got vaccinated, they didn't get any kind of passport, or maybe they got like a receipt or an invoice, but who knows if they held on to it.
Where I was, each time you got one, they gave you an official card.
Oh, they do? Okay.
You got to keep this with you.
Oh, really? Okay, I wasn't aware.
So I think that showing people that you have that is definitely a plus in terms of gaining entry to anywhere. Same thing. I mean, could be said for the quick tests. I mean, which I was thinking last year while everybody's sitting there scrambling, trying to figure out what the vaccine is and how do you make it and what's it going to consist of. I was thinking the whole time, well, but not everybody's got this thing. In fact, more people don't have it than do have it, obviously. Why couldn't we have just spent a little bit of that time and anguish on developing a quick test where in 5 seconds or 5 minutes, everybody knows what's going on. You can go in and have your shows and do your church and do your grocery shopping and go to your baseball games and all the rest of that stuff. And, you know, that didn't happen.
Yeah.
So I think now as we're re-entering the world again, as we used to know it a year ago, I think there's going to be probably a little bit of a time period where I think until people are going to be 100% feeling great about being around strangers, you should probably have something on you that you can prove to anybody you want that you're cool and you have a right to be wherever it is that you're standing at any given time because you're as clean and legal as you can be.
All right.
Mhm.
Well,
I think that it's important, you know,
Yeah.
to a lot of people. I get asked by friends of mine who are so spooked by all this, like somebody here in Hawaii. In Hawaii, it's got the lowest sickness rate and death rate, I think, in the world, or one of the best things. And a guy over here, he's from Chicago, but he's living out here now, and he wanted to know before I came over if I'd had my tests and blah, 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 blah. And I said, you know, you're kind of taking the fun out of me coming over to see you. I mean, it's like you're like asking me to put on a condom before I even leave the house. You know, I was nothing by you guys, but I was never big on those things.
Yeah.
So you know, I'm so over all of this. I'm so looking forward to, you know, the biggest problem that I have is that the show did come off and I didn't sell 10 tickets. That's the problem I want to think about. This other stuff's too much for me, man.
Sure.
Right on. Well, let's get deep into the book, how you start out. You were a big sports aficionado, and the book is great because you have some fantastic photos of all the stuff. I even saw the video of you going on stage with Scorpions and all the different stuff that Chip had sent. But in the book, you know, you have stuff like a letter from Yogi Berra and all, you know, you were collecting, you know, autographs and you were, you were kind of a bit of a hustler, which, you know, kind of it's basically what promoters were, especially back in the 70s. They all kind of started out in that kind of fashion. And it was kind of, that was kind of what the whole promoting game was back then. You had to you had to know the art of the hustle. And, you know, and it was a gamble, you know, it was a risk, you know, like you said, the big shows, it was, you know, you could make a hell of a lot of money doing a show at a big stadium, but the risk is also a lot greater, you know, and the expense is a lot greater. So talk about the early days you're promoting and doing the whole sports thing and getting to know people like Brian Piccolo and so forth.
You know, when you're a little kid and before you know anything about anything, you look up to people around you, whoever's nearby. In my case, I had my dad, my mom, my brothers. You know, and I started going to school, and right around the same time I started going to school, I started learning how to read off of baseball cards, and I was 4 or 5 years old. I mean, I entered first grade reading better than the nuns. Okay. And they didn't like that. They didn't like that I was that smart. They didn't like that I could do batting averages in second grade. That pissed them off to no end because they want to treat you like a little kid, and they want to teach you themselves their way. And instead, you got this wise ass in the front row because I always had to be in the front row because I was loudest. They wouldn't let me be in the back. You know, I started with a Z. I started at the last seat in the room every school year. And by the end of the first day, I was always at the front of the class. And it wasn't for being good. Anyway, you know, the whole thing about sports when I was a little kid, the fascination of it, baseball stars and football stars in the late 50s and the 60s, they were the rock stars. There was not a rock and roll business like we know it now. There wasn't a rock and roll business in the early 60s. I mean, Elvis was there, and the Four Seasons were there, and Gene Pitney was there, and Dion and the Belmonts were there, and all of those guys, the guys with the hair, you know, and I mean, the world didn't wake up musically for kids for real until the Beatles came. You know, now I'm a little bit biased because I wasn't around for when Elvis first came out and all those other groups came out, but they created quite a stir themselves. I know they did, but nothing like the Beatles. The Beatles changed everything.
For real.
And while it was changing everything, it took kids like me and my focus away from sports, because these guys were more exciting. They were funny. I mean, they were cute. Girls loved them. Girls didn't like baseball players. Girls didn't like football players. They liked Beatles and the guys with the hair and the suits and the thing, you know. So that's what I mean, it was a cultural thing as much as anything else that I think influenced the whole country, the whole world, when the mop tops came along. The mop tops. And I mean, everybody changed. Everything in 1 year's time. 63, 64, 65. You wouldn't recognize 1963 in 1965. It was like the old days. It really was. I got my first Beatles single at the end of March. This month, 63, 58 years ago, I got Please Please Me this month. And it changed my life. It changed how I heard music. It changed what I thought of England. Before that, I never. What did anybody know about England? They knew there was a queen and no king. You know, and there wasn't any princesses and these princes and all these people. I can't keep it I can't keep it straight. Those poor kids. But you know, I found out my grandfather was English and Irish. His parents were from the UK. I love the UK. I feel a kinship to it. I'm actually looking into getting a passport to be a UK citizen, because that's what I think about Britain. I love the UK. I love everything about it. I love going there. I love staying there. I love eating there. I'm nuts. I like the food.
Yeah.
You know, it's a great place, and the Beatles made that so for me. How that all changed later was, how did I know 10 years later I was going to be promoting shows, and a couple of years after that I'd be meeting George Harrison and working for him, or you know, and being around these guys. I mean, it's just nuts, but it was great, you know. And it still is. Being around these guys who kind of fell into stuff by accident, just like I did. I mean, tell Paul McCartney he was going to still be known and playing bass guitar at almost 80 years old, and he'd tell you you're crazy, because he never gave that a thought.
They all thought it. By 40, they're done. You know, like
I mean,
Jagger said, I'd kill me if I'm 40 years old and still doing this.
Well, think about it.
There is twice that age.
they only recorded records for less than 7 years.
Yeah.
Which is really nuts when you think about it.
Yeah.
I mean, they were a very short-lived group. I mean, how many groups that lasted for 7 years have people still playing their music and still talking about it to this day?
And they had a lot of music within those 7 years. A lot.
Yeah.
It's a
Well,
lot.
Zeppelin did about 10 years.
You know what? Not to get on a Beatles rant, but I have to agree with you. The thing that blew my mind about the Beatles' history was not only did the world get captured by the innocence of the Beatles, the music fans grew up with the Beatles as they progressed musically and got into the Revolver and the White Album and just, you know, Sgt. Pepper. It was like the fans were running at the same speed they were. It was like, you haven't seen a band, you know, the Rolling Stones are the Rolling Stones, God bless them, but the Beatles were a band that just kind of like blended genres like nobody else and like went places, you know, that were just outlandish for a pop band to do, which they were a pop band, you know.
Yeah. It's something else, and for me to have actually found myself working with them, and I don't mean to gush, but I save gushing for those type of things. I thank them, you know, for doing what they did, because it got me to do what I did. And it's weird to think about it that way, but it's true. You know, I would have never. I don't think I would have ever done this had it not been for them.
So now I've got to. I'm sorry to interrupt. I've got to ask you: were you shitting yourself the first time you met George Harrison? Did you have to use a poker face, or were you in the moment?
Full poker face.
Nice. Okay, cool.
Wait a minute. Ready? It gets better. You know, I'm Catholic, right? So, or I was raised Catholic. I found out later I was Jewish, but I was raised Catholic. And my confirmation name was George. So that should give you an idea how I felt about George.
Wow.
You know, so I did that when I was, fifth grade. So I'm 11.
Yeah.
And of all the names in the world that I picked,
wow.
And my dad goes, it better be the Dragon Slayer, not that fucking beetle. And I said, oh no, Dad, dragons all the way, man, dragons. And I told George that story, and he had the greatest laugh about it. He had lost his voice. You remember on that tour because he hadn't sung live really that much ever, and I put his dressing room together. That was my job for the day. Was I had to put up the tapestries and the incense and the lighting and make it a cool room for him to sit in and get his massage and all that. And they asked me to go out and get vinegar for him to gargle with. And I go, I'm no doctor, right? Why? How about hot tea and lemon with honey? Did that. Doesn't work. We got to get drastic. We got to get my voice back. So I went out and got him this vinegar, and he gargled it, and it got worse. It was painful. It was like we were all kind of almost in tears, you know. And so was he. Was as upset as you could see anybody because you got 10,000 people coming to see you to sing, and you can't sing, and it was just terrible for him. That was one of the hardest things ever to watch. I mean, what should have been such a glorious night for him. Because he truly loved doing that show and that music. I mean, this is just a couple of years after All Things Must Pass came out. And he's playing all those songs live. I mean, wow. You know? And he couldn't sing. Oh, it was terrible. It was terrible. And he even had that cool Dark Horse record out that had some really nice songs on. He couldn't sing nothing. Beatles songs. Oh. And they had people to help cover.
Were the fans disappointed, or did they understand?
Huh?
I said, were the fans disappointed, or were they understanding?
Well, sure they were, but they were so enamored with him just being there, you know. And you know, God bless him. He did as great of a job as he could. Nobody walked out of there saying, "Oh, that was awful." You know, it's just everybody felt bad for him. You know, this isn't a. You know, I mean, he never toured again. And I think that had a little bit to do with the fact of how hard of a time he had. He never wanted to go through that again. I mean, I was always asking, you know, the various managers, let's have a traveling Wilburys tour for Christ's sake.
Ooh.
You know, I mean, who didn't want to see that?
Dude.
You know?
Yeah.
I think it was George because all the other guys toured.
Yeah. All
the other guys toured. I mean, Tom was always touring, and Roy toured a lot. I did shows with him. He was lovely. And Jeff Lynne, well, he didn't tour forever, and then now he goes out and he finds out he's still got a big audience.
Well, did he? ELO just came through here the last time they came through here with George's son. George's son's band opened up for him, but that cat's band is really good.
It better be.
Yeah, right. And then he came out and they did a Traveling Wilburys medley, and it was just like, are you kidding me right now? Goosebumps,
you know, the thing that I always wanted to do, and I got shot down all the time, was I wanted to get Jeff to produce the Beatles family show, which would be everybody from the family who wanted to play. McCartney's got kids, John's got kids, right? Ringo and George. And the guys, the living guys playing with them. That show could retire the debts of a lot of third world countries.
Yeah. No
You know
shit.
what I mean? And I for one, as a music fan, there's a couple of shows I'd like to see. I went to the Zeppelin show at the O2. I had to see that. I went to see Cream when they played at Albert Hall in Madison Square Gardens. Well, and I've done the Who. I've been in Who shows. I do Roger Waters shows. I've done Pink Floyd. But I would like, please, for Jeff Beck and Eric Clapton and Jimmy Page to get together and do the show of shows.
Yeah.
The one that leaves, the one that revives interest all over the world in rock. The masters once and for all. Screw Pavarotti and all those guys. Okay, they can sing, but they can't play a Fender.
Right.
Yeah.
These guys can, and that would be the show to reinvent rock and roll again. And if that wasn't enough, you do this Beatles family show, and this, my friends, is what takes the world away from BTS and boy bands and rap music.
Right.
We get that shit out of
got it.
here, and we get rock on the top 10 again where it belongs.
Well, what do you think coming back in? You know, a lot of people are talking about, especially with these rock bands. I mean, there are a lot of huge tours that got postponed or canceled, or who knows, you know, the Motley, Def Leppard, a lot of stadium tours. And they're saying, you know, when things come back, as you know, the rock metal bands, that's how they make their living. You know, this is mostly a rock metal podcast. And going from that, a lot of people are saying once things start getting back to normal, so to speak, there will just be an influx of shows. And a lot of, let's face it, a lot of the venues, the smaller venues, the House of Blues type of venues, you know, 1,000 to 3,000 seat venues, a lot of them have closed down throughout the country. So there'll be a heavy competition. A lot of people are worried that it could restrict the touring. It could raise up the prices. What's your thoughts on that?
I don't agree with any of that. It's like I said, people have kept their tickets. People are going to go to their shows. When people are talking about like booking new shows right now, I don't want to stop anybody from working, but I really wish the groups that aren't booked, once shows start, once we realize that we're going to actually do this, I wish those groups would wait a few months before they got back into the mix. But you know they're not.
Right.
No.
You know, I mean, right now what you've got is you've got old money that's been spent by all these fans. So they're not missing that money anymore. They've had opportunities to get refunds and they elected to keep their money. I mean, they keep their tickets. So money they have, if they're working, and I hope they are, when they start adding new shows, you know, I mean, people are going to have to be selective, not just because of money, but because of how many nights a week can they go out.
Right.
When this starts up again, I mean, I was looking at my calendar the other day. My September, forget about it. I won't sleep. I won't. I'll get an hour here and an hour there. And you know what? Bring it. I'm looking forward to it. I'd like to do that. But in the meantime, I wish no new shows. Here's the problem with the new shows. It's not so much the competition with the other shows, no matter how big they are. But when you've got all these people lined up to see all these shows that have nothing to do with the groups that aren't booked right now, and you're a new group and you're a new booking, you're taking the chance of landing on a night where people have already bought tickets. And they're not going to come to your show. So don't push it. Take a break. Come back in 22, will you?
I think that, you know, I mean, I agree with you 100%. I also think, though, I don't want to be like, you know, a dreamer, but I have this feeling like my gut as far as, you know, you book arenas, I book, you know, sheds and nightclubs. And I think that I have this feeling that people are going to spend beyond their means when they know they can go back to a live event because they've been so desperate to be in that environment again. I don't know about the big places, but I think the nightclubs are going to crush in the Bay Area, especially once they can reopen. I think it's going to be a crab feed, you know?
Well, I think it will be pretty much everywhere. But I mean, the bottom line is you can only be in so many places at one time.
Right.
Right. And then when new shows get added, I mean, the super fans, the people who are super passionate about various groups, I mean, they'll figure out a way to get there.
Right.
As it is, I'm gonna, I'm wondering about whether or not, and I'm afraid to look when I have 2 and 3 and 4 shows booked in the same night, and not on purpose, but this is just, when these shows reschedule, you got to take them when the band has to reschedule.
Yeah,
they're rescheduling their whole geographical tour the same way. And it's always funny when you have people who you're close to, and it's not like they haven't done this before and they can do the job without you being there. But I want to be there for every show.
Right.
I mean, it's one of my things is like after taking the risk, sometimes it's very limited risk, but sometimes it's real risk. Every time you put on a show, though, it's like giving birth, and you want to see what the baby looks like a few months later.
And let's be honest, though, promoters and talent buyers are a little bit of control freaks. You know what I mean? To some degree, talent buyers and promoters are kind of control freaks a little bit. I mean, don't you want to make sure that everything's perfect? Exactly. Right.
I'm one of those guys as I've gotten older. I've always been very content to let people in various positions that run shows for me do what they do.
Yeah.
And I mean, as long as I can show up and there's a parking spot and an office for me, and hopefully with a private bathroom, and a place to eat, and a seat for me to go watch a show. I mean, I'm a happy guy, and it's like you can't get those things if you're worrying about all that other garbage. So
but you're still thinking about them.
What?
Those things are still going on in your head. Letting your people do their jobs is very important. Absolutely. But in my head, I'm like, oh yeah, hands off. But in my head, I'm like watching everybody going, oh shit. Am I there to catch?
I didn't say I wasn't watching.
Okay, cool.
No, you know how weird it is for me to go to somebody else's show.
Oh yeah.
It is. You know how hard it is, right?
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, because you can't. I mean, if everything's okay, and your entrance to the place is okay, say the promoter or the band or somebody who you're going to see, they know you and they take care of the one thing they know you want: parking.
Yeah.
Right. The world is about parking, man. So your night is going to be guided by how well you got into the building and parked.
Right.
If your parking screwed up, guess what's next? No tickets, and your passes are stickies after show. Forget catering and forget the bathroom. Forget going into the band's dressing room and raiding their booths. Nothing like that. Now, if your parking pass is waiting for you when you show up, you can bet you're going to have a good time that night.
Right.
It's really true. I mean, it sounds funny, but it's true.
Let's go back.
My friends are like that too. They want to go, so how's parking at the show tonight? Oh, I'm going to have a hard time. Forget it. I ain't coming.
Let's go back to I'm sorry, Jimmy. I was just saying, let's go back to the early days. Jimmy had mentioned something, and I think it was so true back in the 70s and 80s, how, people like promoters or certain, photographers or producers that you knew, they were like rock stars to us, to fans growing up, just as the bands. It was, and you guys were kind of treated as such, and you played that role. I mean, I see you up on stage with Scorpions and the backstage part. I've been to, promoters and see them. They're like a part of the band. And it was, I know it's changed now a lot, but back in the day with the big backstage parties and the craziness and stuff, it was insane. But going back to the 70s and stuff, there's a lot of stuff in the music business, with the mafia and all the stuff. And with the promoters, there was a lot of death threats. I mean, there was a lot of crazy shit going on. Let's face it, back then, especially with a lot of the big shows. you know, of course, Peter Grant supposedly changed a lot of stuff the way that the system was, and he cared for the band. When Zeppelin came in, it was like, you do this, we get this amount of money. No, or
No, that was something else.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. You know, but you know, from what I've read, that was kind of a game changer when
Which
Zeppelin when Zeppelin kind of came through with Peter Grant, the way that he did the business with the promoters. It was like we got 190% of the door or whatever kind of thing.
Well, you know, that whole experience and that was a game changer for BGP. It really wasn't for the business, I don't think. You know, that was a very unfortunate day that they had there, and but as far as the business part of it goes, yeah, Peter was instrumental in changing the way the mechanics of the deal structures changed over the years, for sure. And you know, we went from, you know, like Herbie Herbert paying 25 grand for Journey versus an 85-15, and then you got Peter Grant in there, and suddenly it was $1 million versus 95%. So you know, it's hey, look, if you're lucky enough to get a Zeppelin show, you paid it.
Sure.
Yeah.
It's gonna sell out.
But in the other cases, I mean, you know, it just shows you how, you know, young our business is and was. You know, when things changed as they did in the 70s, people were realizing how much money there was to be made and what was on the table, or, you know, and who was getting what. And as you keep repeating the, you know, the whole calendar of going around and touring and going to various cities along with the cycle of your record albums, you know, and remember back then in the 70s, our tickets were locked in at $5, $6, $7, $8. I mean, I remember my first $10 ticket was in 1978 at Dooley's nightclub in Tempe on Thanksgiving. I charged $10 for Van Morrison, and they screamed for my fucking head. $10 for Van and 700 seats.
That doesn't even cover the service fee these days.
Bill Graham managed them, and we were going to have Robin Williams open for $100.
Wow.
Van Morrison got 4,000 guarantee for that show, and that he canceled it. That fucking Van, he canceled the show. You know, it was awful. But anyway, yeah, but $10. So everything did change. But you know, when the only thing that could really affect the band's pay was charging more money for tickets. You know, I mean, they locked them in at that cheap ticket price for years, and people were very spoiled by it, rightfully so. But when tickets got up to 10 and then 15 and then 20, I mean, we all felt like we were like, you know, talking dirty in church. You know, I mean, because people were not happy about, you know, those ticket prices going up. When they really started going up, I'm afraid, was when in the 90s, when all the consolidation started happening, is when they really went berserk.
Yep.
And you had this competition with superpowers between each other competing for tours, and suddenly, you know, a band that you paid $100,000 is now getting $500,000. You know, Fleetwood Mac was one of those groups. I mean, they went from being huge to out of this world into outer space. With, you know, and damned if people just didn't pay those tickets.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, it's like I've always been, you know, with scalpers being involved and third parties and all that stuff. I've always been a big fan of charging the people down in front as much as you can possibly get for them, but the rest of the house should be normal. You know, I mean, you shouldn't be asked to spend more than $10 or $15 to sit on a lawn for anybody.
Right.
In my book. You know, you're not down in front with a chair. It's not even human. And you're going to pay $50 to go on some lawn for somebody because they got to make $5 million that night. It's a weird business in that regard. But hey, look, I know a lot of people right now be happy to pay $50 to sit on the lawn.
Right.
Sure, yeah.
I'm one of them. I'm one of them.
Yeah, sure.
Hey, Danny, speaking of big shows, did you do that show at Bank One Stadium in Phoenix? What was it, 98 into 99, the big Black Sabbath? It was Black Sabbath, Pantera, Megadeth. I know you've worked with Megadeth a lot out there. That was a fantastic show at the stadium. What a great show.
Great.
Slayer.
What was so funny about that night is like the same night I had Shania Twain a block away at the basketball arena.
Oh wow.
So I had my own golf cart with my own driver,
right,
which was like really cool. And I went. I know that probably doesn't sound like a really big deal, but for me that night, we sold $3 million worth of tickets between the two shows.
That was New Year's Eve.
Every ticket was sold for both shows. Yeah. And I got to have this joke all night long going back and forth. I get in the cart and I'd say, all right, where am I? Am I going to heaven or hell now?
Right on.
And I got to spend really good time that night with Tony Iommi, who's my favorite guy with Sabbath. I love Ozzy, I love Geezer, but me and Tony have always been especially close. And in fact, at one point I drove him down there with a hood on. And I brought him by the side of the stage so he goes, I just want to see Shania for 10 seconds.
Tony said this.
So here's me and Tony Iommi in the barricade of Shania Twain. It was great. She saw us too, and she thought it was hilarious. She told me about it later. She was great. But anyway, that was the first show that stadium, the ballpark, ever had.
That's right. That stadium just opened.
And what a night that was.
Well, that was Sabbath's first show as a reunion in the States. I know they did the things in Birmingham, and that was their very first U.S. appearance as Black Sabbath in like 30 years.
Love Black Sabbath. Black Sabbath is the heavy metal Beatles.
Yeah.
They are the band.
Oh, yeah.
Now, did you put that bill together? Because I know it was a one-off show. It wasn't a tour, but it was such a great bill. Pantera, Slayer, Megadeth, and I think Soulfly opened. If I'm not mistaken.
I did that with Sharon Osbourne, but Sharon had the idea for most of those groups. I would give her the credit for that.
Right on.
Right.
Very cool.
Awesome. Hey, so Danny, just I wanted to ask you, in terms of going back to the book, one of the toughest, I think, moments is when you talk about having to sell your company, Evening Star, which, probably had to be obviously one of the most, I'd say, difficult things you probably ever had to do in your life. And I think what made it worse was that, you had no idea that the sale was all part of a preconceived plan to, essentially monopolize the whole concert promotion market, which we don't know today as Live Nation. Probably the only part of the book where, scumminess, for lack of a better word, where it comes in, but, it really rears its ugly head, obviously, the music business in that instance. So talk about, I guess, just a bit about how frustrating it is for you to have to watch what they're doing right now to the industry as a whole.
Well, I'm not terribly frustrated or upset or angry at all about any of that because, it's just a different game now. And I was part of it. I was part of that change. I sold into it. While I'm pointing fingers, I should point one right back here at me because I sold. Now, had I known I was going to be, I'm going to move a little bit here because I'm noticing I'm getting dark and I guess the sun's going down. There we go.
That's right. You're in Hawaii, huh?
I am.
Nice. Yeah.
Let's see. Here we go. When I sold, I didn't know that was going to take place. Otherwise, I wouldn't have done it. I would have had to been sold a completely different new way to do the Clear Channel thing, and that didn't work out at all. That's a very long story. The thing is even though now I don't get to work with a lot of the arena bands that I help build up to being an arena type of group. Because Live Nation or AEG will buy all of their tours and not let me have any of it. They're very greedy in that regard. But I mean, if somebody's going to put up 20 or 30 million, I guess if it was me, I wouldn't want to be sharing it either. But I do all of my favorite groups. I do my auditorium shows, my performing arts centers, and occasionally some arenas. When my groups who haven't gotten so old they lost their memories of who broke them in the Southwest. I don't mind saying that because somebody forgot. I mean, I did James Taylor for 30 years. He changed managers, and suddenly I don't know James Taylor anymore. And James Taylor loves me. I love James Taylor. Apparently his manager does. I mean, this happens with a lot of different groups. And I'm not sure why. I don't think it's me. I think it's just people getting old and lazy. It's like easier to just say yes to one person instead of having to talk to 3 or 4 or 5 promoters. In the old days, we all ran our markets and we protected those areas for and on behalf of the bands. So like I said, sure, it upsets me when I don't work with somebody that I should be. It's kind of like watching somebody date your wife.
Sure.
But do you think someone like
to see that?
nobody
wants
go
to
ahead.
know about it, much less see it. But I have to do both. But I switched my head over to the right side of things there, and rather than get upset about it, it's like I thank myself, thank my friends for the people that I still get to work with. I mean, there are so many incredible people since that's been 10 years, Valentine's Day 2011, since I went back on my own. And I found an email from that same month just the other day that had the bullet points for most of the chapters that are in the book. So it took me a few years to get it together and put it down. But this last whole year afforded us the opportunity to put all those stories together and the pictures and some memorabilia and get that out, because I think it was a story that needed to be told. I don't know of another promoter book quite like this, not to pat myself on the back, but I think the rest of the promoters, I want to issue a challenge to go and do the same thing, because people in each market have lived with each of these promoters for the last 30, 40, 50 years, and they should know what was going on all that time. And that I kind of felt like I owed some explanations on a few things, not to clear anything up that much or anything, but, just to share with people what they didn't know. And I, on top of it, I'm proud of that. So everybody in Phoenix has really rallied around, in Vegas and elsewhere, have rallied around the fact that we did this. And I'm really happy they like it. I've got nothing but great support from it.
Well, that's a great thing you bring up, and that Matt brings up about Live Nation too, and Jimmy could probably back me up on this. It was so much different, I think, in the 80s into the early 90s, and then the business started to really change. Back, I know when you were booking the Bay Area, it was all about, you were friends with the bands. You had this relationship. It was a community. It was a family, And I think a lot of the big cities, and that's how it seems with you, with the artists. You hung out with them. You partied with them. Now it's become with the Live Nations, and you could go with the radio market, with the clear channels and this and that. They monopolized, and it became a business. It became a corporate business where you don't have that bond with the art. You don't have that. But in the same way, they monopolized. Do you think it's the fact that, because a lot of people had said that when it comes to certain booking agents, some of the main booking agents, Live Nation will come to them and they'll book some of their bands and they'll want an exclusive, which could have been with the James Taylor or whatever. They said, well, you're on this booking agent. We want all your bands, and that's kind of what kind of happened, I think, into the late 90s, into the 2000s. And I think that's why the business has suffered a lot too. What's your view on that, both Danny and Jimmy?
I'm, I know what you're saying, and there's a bit of that out there. I probably felt stronger about it a few years ago. This last year is knocked a little of the piss and vinegar out of me as far as nobody being able to do any shows. It's kind of like been a great equalizer for everybody. Nobody's been able to do anything. So I'm just as big as they are, and they're just as small as I am at this point. The bottom line is I don't compare anymore. That's gone. When I can go out and do people like Todd Rundgren or John Prine, who I did so many shows with, or Tony Bennett, or Frankie Valli, or Tedeschi Trucks. I mean, there's all of these great bands that I'm doing business with. All of them are world class. If I don't do Britney Spears or Jennifer Lopez, am I going to lose any sleep?
Right.
Am I going to not?
Probably sleep a lot better.
So, I mean, think of the big groups that I broke that I'm not doing that I'm really upset about. Sometimes Alice goes out and I can't do dates with them because they pay them a big guarantee for a tour to play all the amphitheaters. Right. Well, that's the way it goes. So I go to his house and have pizza instead.
Right.
And I don't got to pay. He buys.
It's good you saw that friendship.
So
yeah, it's a good way to look at it. Yeah.
Bottom line, the guys who are my friends that I can be in business with, if it can happen, it happens. And if it can't, it can't. There's very few people that I'm upset with over that. There's only been a couple people that have truly ditched me. And I let them know how I feel. And the fact is, it is what it is. They have their reasons. And the fact is life is going to go on. And as long as people get to see those shows and they have fun at them, I'll have mine and I'll get my licks in, and everybody can just go do whatever they got to do. I think this, like I said, this whole thing that's gone on has been a hell of a learning curve for everybody. And I hope it teaches everybody, especially the big guys, to be more considerate of everything and everybody, because we're all in this together, this whole thing, not just shows and music and everything, but the whole world. There's a lot that banks on us bringing this back in a good way too. So I'm hoping business stays straight and everybody gets to go to all the shows they ever want to.
Right on.
Yeah. Awesome.
Jimmy, how has it affected you as a booking agent? Or the change, or what have you noticed a lot over the years from I know there's not as many clubs around in the Bay Area like there used to be, obviously, back in the day.
Well, I mean, it's like, not to talk major shit. I thought that, I could see when the Live Nations Clear Channel thing started to happen. I knew that was going to become a train wreck. You said earlier, it was like, we got to hang out with all these musicians and stuff, and we were at the shows. And back then, we were still trying to make money, but we weren't wearing a shark suit doing it. You know what I mean? Like, I think that there's a difference between being cold and calloused and booking a show as opposed to being into what you're doing. You know what I mean? It's a different thing. Like, you can do the great math and make sure that the Fleetwood Mac show is going to sell out, but at the same time, are you really putting any love and compassion behind the event itself? You know what I mean? It was just.
You got to see, with me, it was a little bit different because Stevie lived in Phoenix, and me and her dad were best friends, and the three of us ended up owning Compton Terrace together.
Nice.
So yeah, it really affects me when she doesn't work for me.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's a weird thing. I mean, about how you, it's like separating yourself from church and state. It's really weird. I mean, it's like, okay, is this Stevie the singer? Is this Stevie the business person? Is this Stevie the daughter of my best friend?
Right.
Or is she just, and I've known her since 1974.
Yeah.
And she was nobody.
Right.
So, and that's my point about working with people, is like when you start with them at a very early age, and now you're older and they're older too, and you're going, you're too big to work with me.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
It's tough. Yeah.
Tell you what, I'll leave you a couple tickets for Tony Bennett the way you asked.
Well, that's what's great about this book is you really tell these old stories, and it is a story about about friendship and about relationships, and what was built back then, which I think is sorely missed in this day and age where everything is so corporate and business. And the book, again, All Excess, has fantastic photos and really, really great stories. I know we're about an hour and a half in right now. So by closing it up, Matt, was there anything you wanted to say before we close this up and get the?
No,
the
I
last
just want
words
to
on it?
encourage the listeners to definitely pick this book up. Like you just hit it right on the, nail right on the head. I mean, just stories of so many different bands, a lot of metal and hard rock bands in there too. We didn't touch on any of the Guns N' Roses stuff, which is really interesting in there, and the Motley Crue stuff. So definitely check this out. It's an excellent book.
Well, if you want, we can have a group by group call again later if you want to, and we can run through some of those if you feel like. I'd be happy.
Yeah, sure.
That would actually be fun. Yeah,
Awesome.
because there is so much that we didn't, obviously
There,
get into and deep in.
Yeah, there's definitely some good ones there. I really liked doing that, doing the book, and I hope for any of your followers that are listening, I sell them at dzplive.com, which is our Danny Zelisko Presents promoter website, and I even have T-shirts there. I should send you guys some shirts. You need an All Excess shirt on your back, so people know what's going on. But if people want to buy books, that's the place to come. Or else, if you can't remember all that, Amazon has it too.
Right on.
Awesome.
Anything you want to add there, Jimmy, before we close out?
Again, I want to say, Danny, like seriously, I'm not even blowing wind up your dress. I've watched you for years and always been floored by. I'm originally from El Paso, Texas. I used to play club gigs in New Mexico and Arizona, cover bands and all that shit. So I'm well aware of the terrain out there. It's such a great place, and I appreciate everything you've done. And now I'm going to order the book as soon as we sign off here. I'm going to go order the book from your website. I have to read it.
All right.
I can't wait for you to read it. And thanks, Jimmy. I appreciate that. It's very nice of you.
Cool, man.
Very
Thank
cool.
you.
A fantastic.
Bob, Matt, nice to meet you guys. And
Same as you, Danny.
If you guys want to do something with bands and stuff like that, and keep it narrowed down to that to do a show, I'd be happy to do it.
That would be fun. Yeah, because
Awesome.
there was so much to talk about on just one podcast. So
let's schedule another one.
sounds
Sure.
great. I'll
Whenever
just
you
talk
want,
to
I'm happy
Chip.
to do it.
Sounds
All
great.
right.
Appreciate it, Danny. Jimmy.
Thanks, Danny. Jimmy.
Matt.
All right, guys.
All right, guys.
Have a good night,
All right,
guys.
guys.
All right.
See you
Take care,
later.
guys.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, man.
Bye, guys.